Well, I've finally done it. It only took over a month and hours of time and effort, not to mention the countless resets, but aside from all of that, I can finally say that I've completed the classic JRPG, Earthbound, which was actually titled Mother 2 in Japan, as this game is, believe it or not, a sequel. So here I am typing this out as I watch the end credits sequence scroll by, much like I did once I finished Chrono Trigger, and I'm preparing to give my thoughts on this grand adventure. So, without further ado, let's gear up and take a swing at this Nintendo cult classic. This game takes place in the peaceful city of Onet. Or Onet? Onet? Onyx? I don't know. But anyway, one night, a strange meteorite lands in this town, awakening our hero Ness. Ness's mother, being probably the most self-aware parent in an RPG, concedes to the fact that Ness will go investigate regardless of what she says, so she gives him the go-ahead, and our adventure begins. As Ness discovers the meteorite, he is contacted by a bee who tells him that he and 3 other children are the chosen ones who will destroy a great alien evil known as Gygus. Nope, I can't think of a single thing weird about that at all. So Ness, now knowing that it's his responsibility to group up with the other children, begins his quest to seek these kids out and save the world. But it won't be easy. In fact, if I said it would be hard, even that would be an understatement. As it turns out, almost every criminal, cult, wild animal, alien being, undead being, and officer of the law wants Ness and his friends dead. Things get even more complicated as Ness's next-door neighbor Pokey is constantly obstructing your progress and proving to be a continual thorn in your side. So, how's a 13-year-old boy supposed to overcome all of this? Well, aside from cracking all of his foes upside the head with baseball bats, it turns out that Ness has psychic powers that can be used in and out of combat to make his life a bit easier. But if that's not enough, he can get by with a little help from his friends. The first friend he meets is Paula, who is a powerful magic user. Afterwards, he runs into Jeff, who is the genius son of a master scientist, a fact that you will be reminded of every time his name is brought up in dialogue. And finally, Pooh, who is the martial artist prince from a land far, far away. Stop laughing. With these 4 powerful children combined, they will be unstoppable. Well, that is until you meet an overleveled enemy. Considering this game is a JRPG on the SNES, I'm sure many of you have probably guessed that the combat system is turn-based. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of turn-based combat as a whole, but this game does a good job of making things a bit interesting. Like Chrono Trigger, this game utilizes a speed system in which the character with higher speed gets to attack first. This means that if your party's speed is high enough, then some enemies will be defeated before they can even start their attack. Just keep in mind that this works both ways. Along with this, you can obviously attack, use your psychic abilities, use items, or do nothing if you wish. But there is another interesting aspect to the combat. When you take damage from an enemy, the damage is not instantaneous. In other words, once you take a hit, the damage from the hit slowly ticks down until it reaches 0. If you move quickly enough in the meantime, you can use an attack, heal yourself, or even finish the battle. Now let's get to the reviewing. The graphics for the time were quite impressive in the detail that was shown in the enemies. While not pre-rendered like the DKC titles, there is still a large variety in the foes that you will face. But even the environments all look vastly different, and each town is very distinctive from the last. Not to mention, during combat there are various effects thrown in for each psychic power you use, and this is also shown outside of combat if you are suffering from some sort of illness. However, this brings up one of my biggest problems with this game. The screen flashes. A lot. Now, I'm not photosensitive, but even after playing this game for a while, I was starting to get headaches. So, for your sake, I seriously hope you aren't photosensitive if you try to play this game. Moving on to the gameplay, well, as stated previously, the combat is all turn-based and the system works fairly well. Potential migraines aside. Initiating combat is done by walking into enemies while traveling. If you and the enemy are facing each other, then combat proceeds as normal. If you approach them from behind, then your party gets an initiative attack. However, if an enemy approaches you from behind, then they get to attack first. Always be sure to keep this in mind, as this can be a death sentence from high-level foes. Now moving on to the best part of the game, the story. This story is not only very well written from a global and character standpoint, but there is also a very large amount of satire about 90s American culture and RPGs. In fact, if this game is taken purely at face value, it's actually a very humorous and uplifting coming-of-age tale. However, once the game progresses and the player begins to read between the lines of the dialogue and sees the more and more dark occurrences, it becomes very clear that this game is actually pretty dark. Like, very dark. Throughout this game, you will face cultists, gang members, crooked cops, crooked officials, and some incredibly disturbing boss battles. It's said that this game's creator based many of these trials on current events of the time, and even the disturbing final boss was based off of a traumatizing event from his past. When you think about it, this game is really about a young child who loses his innocence and is faced with the realization that the world isn't just sunshine and rainbows, but in reality, people can be cruel, cold, uncaring, and even monstrous. But that's really part of growing up, isn't it? At some point in all of our lives, we realize that the world can be a scary place. But, like Ness here, we all must learn to remain strong, face any challenges that come our way, and remain hopeful for brighter days. As a result, Ness and his friends become stronger people, and that is a lesson that is beautifully portrayed through this title. So, if you're interested in checking out this cult classic JRPG, then this game can be found on Nintendo's eShop for $10. And trust me, this is one adventure that is worth taking. So until we meet again, this is eDog, and I'll see you next time for episode 100.